Let's make a dessert from this 200-year-old cookbook. Last time we made this one. This time, let's give this one a go. First, we need to make red currant jelly. The book says, take 7 pounds of red currants, 3 of white currants, and 2 of white raspberries. Rub the whole through a rather coarse horsehair sieve. Now, I'm using red raspberries instead of white, and I couldn't get fresh currants at this time of year. I could only get frozen red currants, no white currants. So mine may be a little redder than the original, but it should taste similar. And after an hour and a half of trying to push all this fruit through a sieve, you get one bowl of pulp and the other of juice. Next it says, pour the juice on 9 pounds of royal sugar broken in small pieces. Place the whole on a sharp fire and take the scum carefully off with a copper skimmer. So I guess we take off all these really fine bubbles off the top. Being careful, as he said, because this is very, very hot. Now, to know how long to boil it for, it says, hold the skimmer a little on one side and let the jelly drop from it. If on quitting the skimmer it appears to set, it's proof that your jelly is sufficiently boiled. I think that looks right, but let's check it on a plate. Look how brilliantly red that is, and it's set up beautifully. That's perfect. I only made 1/4 of this recipe, and it's enough to fill 2 big jars. This cookbook always makes very large quantities of everything. It was written by the French chef Carême, who is known as the Chef of Kings. We actually just did a trip to France.
Graham, we are in France.
We saw so many beautiful places, and the Eiffel Tower, of course. We abseiled down waterfalls, stayed in a tree house, and did about 25,000 steps a day and had lots of fun. And as well as all of that, we went here to visit Château de Valençay. Napoleon told his chief diplomat, Talleyrand, to buy this chateau. Now, Talleyrand lived here, and they used it for grand dinners to entertain foreign dignitaries. If you go inside and go all the way downstairs, you'll see where Carême, the author of this 200-year-old cookbook, once worked. Now, Carême himself was from an extremely poor background. When he was just 10 years old, he was abandoned by his family. Now, fortunately for him, he was taken in by a chef who gave him odd jobs to do around the kitchen, and eventually he got a pastry chef apprenticeship when he was still just a little kid. And by the time he was 19 years old, he'd become very well known for these ornate pastry creations that he was making. So Talleyrand employed him here at Château de Valençay. Check out the size of that mortar and pestle. Mine is clearly way too small for making these old recipes. Maybe that's why I've had trouble in the past. And this steampunk looking contraption was apparently for roasting coffee beans and cocoa beans. Looks pretty cool to me. I'd like to try that one. Imagine the dessert that we're making today being cooked here in this very kitchen, baked in these ovens, and then being sent up the dumbwaiter to the butlers waiting upstairs, where it would be whisked on through to the dining table. Would you rather be seated at the table with Talleyrand or working in the kitchen with Carême? From what I've heard of Talleyrand, I think I'd rather be in the kitchen, so we'd better keep baking. Next, we need a circle of confectioner's paste, and for that, Carême says, take 1.5 pounds of sifted flour, make a hole in the centre as usual, and put therein 2 eggs, 3 yolks, a pound of pounded sugar, and a pinch of salt, and stir this for 2 minutes only, in order that the sugar may be a little melted. Add afterwards the flour and another yolk if necessary, so that it may be of the same thickness as a paste for making hot and cold pies. Then give this 5 or 6 turns by working it well with your wrist, which will render it particularly sleek and binding. Now I ended up needing to add another egg to this to make it all come together. And then once you've rolled it out, it says on the other recipe that we need a 9-inch circle for this dessert. This amount made enough for 4 9-inch circles, so if you want to make it, just quarter the amounts. Then it says to egg the top lightly, but by no means to the edges, and prick it here and there with the point of a knife to facilitate evaporation of the air, after which you put it in a moderate oven. Now this bakes quite hard, so you can think of it a bit as like making an edible cake board. Next it says, after giving 2 pounds and a quarter of puff paste 12 turns, cut out 16 round pieces, 4 of which must be 8 inches in diameter, 4 7.5, 4 7, and 4 6.5. That's a lot of circles. Cut out the centres of all of them with a paste cutter of 2 inches in diameter. Then cut another round piece of 6.5 inches in diameter, keeping it whole. Put them in a moderate oven, taking them out as soon as the paste is perfectly dry. Before we do the next step, let's go back to France.
Bonjour. Bonjour. Toi, oui. Chocolat. Oui.
Before going to France, I did not know any French at all, so I spent 3 weeks doing 10 minutes a day on one of the top language learning apps in the world, who happen to be today's sponsor, Babbel. I chose travel as the reason for wanting to learn, and so it customized the lessons to be appropriate for that.
Grand.
Grand. Grand. That's hard in French. I am definitely still a beginner, but it was a great help being able to understand and speak a little bit of French while we were over there. And Babbel even offers a 20-day money-back guarantee. What language would you like to learn to speak? Click on the link below to get 60% off your subscription to Babbel. Next, from here, the recipe splits in 2. We can either choose to make the cake de millefeuille à la ancienne, or ditto, the same, à la moderne. And down the bottom it says, see the second half of plate 2. So this is the millefeuille à la ancienne, and this stripy one is the à la moderne, so let's make the modern one. To do that, we need the whites of 6 eggs beaten up and mixed with 8 ounces of very fine pounded sugar. These rotary egg beaters were not actually invented for another 50 years after this book was written, so Carême would not have had the chance to use one of these, but they are quicker than just a whisk, so you're going to have to forgive me for cheating here. We also need to chop some pistachios finely, and then we'll be ready for assembly. Cover the top of one of the large ones with half a potful of apricot marmalade, then lay another large piece over it. In this book, the apricot marmalade recipe has no citrus or citrus rind in it like you would expect marmalade to have today. It's just made from apricots and sugar, so like an apricot jam. And it defines a potful as a pound. So that would be about 2/3 of this jar, and there's just no way I can fit that much on this little ring without it all just falling off. Next it says, mask the edges of these 2 pieces with the white of an egg prepared as before stated. Then roll them over some pistachios and afterwards put them in for 10 minutes in a slack oven. Then mask another piece with currant jelly. Cover it as before, and after egging the edges, roll them over some coarse sugar and then put them immediately in the oven. Join the remaining pieces in the same manner, 2 and 2, and after edging as before, roll them alternately on pistachios and coarse sugar. Ornament the top of the remaining piece of puff paste, that without an opening in the centre, with meringues. Put also a ring of small meringues of the size of an almond round the edge, and with some white of an egg fix a handsome rosette in the middle. Now, with what those instructions just described, I think that sounds nothing like what the picture has to me. So I've gone ahead and done what I think the picture looks like and then baked it as instructed. Now it says, when all your 8 cakes are quite cold, place one of them, the edge of which has been covered in pistachios, on a round piece of confectioner's paste. Remember we made this at the start? It's quite solid. Now put that first one on and it says, cover the top with currant jelly and put another cake upon it, the edge of which has been rolled in sugar. Proceed in this manner, beginning with the largest cakes, placing alternately one with a green and another with a white edge. Finally, the top of each with a preserve. When all your cakes have been disposed of in this manner, place the last piece of puff paste on top of the whole. The inside of this cake is not filled with cream. It's interesting to note that the ancient version of this dessert said to fill it with cream, so I wonder why not this one. It is a very tall dessert. Now if I spin it around, you can see that this layer here has collapsed. It was the same size as these ones, but it's been crushed by the weight of what's on top of it, which is causing the whole thing to lean a bit. But it does seem stable. I don't think it's going to fall over, and if you sent this to the table like that, it is a pretty impressive dessert. 1, 2, 3, your eyes.
Wow.
That is spectacular.
That's quite impressive.
It's like lots of pastry and then more pastry.
And it looks like it's slightly fallen over, but still very impressive.
It looks like a ancient sweet Dalek.
It's pretty good. It does just taste like pastry though.
Yum. That's delicious.
That's bad. That's just way too much jam.
What would make this dessert better?
A lot of cream.
It's probably a little bit better with cream.
That made it a lot better.
If we go back to the patisserie in France, you'll see a modern mille-feuille. There's no jam or jelly to be seen. It's just icing on the top, 3 layers of puff pastry with a custard or a pastry cream between the layers. The millefeuille means 1,000 leaves, and on many websites, Carême is credited with inventing the modern millefeuille. But even though his is called modern, somewhere between 1834 and now, it has changed completely into this much smaller form. With thanks to my patrons for your amazing support, it's really appreciated. Head on over to Patreon if you want to see a couple of my favourite things from our trip to France. Make it a great week by being kind to others, and I'll see you on Friday.
Don't forget to subscribe.